Um, so welcome everyone. This is our He Said, She Said. It's kind of a tongue twister. Communication to nourish our relationships. And I am really super excited to welcome my guest speaker here today. And let me just go ahead by starting reading her bio. So Chris Barney is a successful entrepreneur, a multifaceted trainer, and a leadership and communication expert. She has coached and trained hundreds of individuals, ranging from entrepreneurs to corporate executives. Her keynotes, Leadership Inside Out and Communication Inside Out, have been well received by corporate leaders, entrepreneurs, and small business owners. She has successfully built and run 4 companies in 4 distinct industries. And the breadth of her experience gives her a unique vantage point that allows her to customize her message and relate to leaders' struggles while helping lead them to solutions. And her new book, Inside Out, teaches the 7 traits to change your life and your world. Is having a profound impact, and her online TV channel, All Things Possible TV, has been downloaded over 150,000 times and has allowed Chris to share her expertise with hundreds of thousands of people around the world. She has over 125 videos online and helped a ton with supporting couples in their marriage relationship and literally saved many marriages. So I'm really thrilled to have her as our guest tonight as we talk about communication to nourish relationships. And I have to add in here, when I first met Chris, we were at a business retreat, and she was there at the cabin as I got there, and I thought she was the one in charge. She looked all professional and beautiful, and it was so fun to get to know her. We kind of just hung out in the bedrooms that evening and just had a party and got into some really good, deep conversation. So I know that she has some amazing value to give to us tonight. And I just want to share one testimonial here from Marla D., who is the creator of Clear and Simple Organizing. Marla says, Chris is a powerhouse with a big heart. She has taught me so much and dissolved my excuses, all while giving me the tools that I can implement immediately. Thank you, Chris, for being a bold, refreshing voice of truth for real change. So excited to get going here.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I know that Chris is fantastic at communication. In fact, I have been receiving her newsletters, and she sent some information out on communication. I thought, oh, that's perfect. Let's have a discussion about that. How that is so important for our relationships. It can really make or break our relationships. And so with that, I noticed that she talks about confusing versus complete communication. And sometimes I feel like, communication, we're definitely lacking in some things. So what can you share with us? Expand our understanding of this confusing versus the complete communication.
Okay, I will. And thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here with you, and I'm just excited to just share as many nuggets as possible in this next 45 minutes to an hour that we have together. So I teach 7 traits, and one of those traits specifically is the acronym that I teach with it is CONNECT in complete communication. And for each of my traits that I teach, I break it down to where you have, in this case, confusing communication versus complete communication. And I hate to right off the bat read stuff to you, but the best way for me to get through this is to actually read the list that I put out in that email that you liked. Confusing communication to me is any type of communication that it has an unclear message, or there's a negative message, and that the communication is not going good. The conversation is not working, and even when it's ended, that there's hurt feelings, that there's confusion in what was meant, how it was taken, and all those parts. And so that's what I consider confusing communication to be. The best thing for me to do is to read this list for you, though. So some of the things that you can look at for yourself, and I'm going to read through this fast, For those of you who are on this or registered for this webinar, I will be sending you an email with, I will put both of these bullet point lists out for you, as well as like I've got a deal for my book and stuff like that too. So in the email, you'll have the opportunity to have this written down. So if you can't write as fast as I talk, that's okay, because I will include this piece. And I will let you know where you can find the article in my blog so that you can go back to it. So in confusing communication, these are some of the bullet points that I say, if this is happening, it's going to be confusing. So the first one is to not speak up for yourself. So that's pretty cut and dry, not speaking up for yourself, not speaking your truth. So when you're communicating, but you're not sticking to your values, you're not sticking to your truth, you're not sticking to your beliefs, it will be very confusing, because you'll come across in body language, in tone, inflection, and all these other ways of having bad communication. Finding fault with the other person. So much of the time when we have communication, we don't think about, okay, I'm finding fault with this person, or I'm in judgment, right? And judgment's another one that we'll cover in a minute. Jumping to conclusions. Jumping to conclusions can cause a lot of problems. And I'll tell you a story after I go through these lists about jumping to conclusions, and where I totally fell. I'll totally tell you the story about how I felt. And the next one is having expectations. That one will cover that same story. So we have expectations where we want those to be met, but maybe we're not even voicing it. So the person that we're having communication with has no idea that we have these expectations that they're failing on. The next one is being in judgment. Whenever we are in judgment, whether it's being critical of that person or finding fault, whenever we're in judgment, it's going to get in the way of communication. Not paying attention to clues like body language, voice inflection, and attitude. So much can be told if you just watch, and we'll be covering some more of that later. Playing the blame game. Anytime you're blaming someone else, you're creating confusing communication when you're not taking accountability, and one of them is taking accountability. And whenever we get into the blame game, we're not doing good communication, because we're not being ourselves, we're not being authentic, we're not being true. We're totally passing the buck. We're not being accountable. Being dishonest or lacking integrity. So much of our communication right now in our world has lack of integrity. People don't believe you. People don't trust you, because we have got a world where you can't trust everybody. So whenever there's that going on, you see confusing communication. So not that I ever want to bring politics, but look at what politics is going on right now. Tons and tons of confusing communication on all aspects. Whether you like how it turned out or you don't like how it turned out, there is confusing communication everywhere in that. Not being interested in the other person. Like your lack of interest and your lack of caring really shows up. Putting yourself first rather than putting others first. Not being respectful, being impatient, being irresponsible, and having poor listening skills. One of the things that you can see all over the internet, but if you start doing studies, the biggest problem we have in communication in our world right now is the lack of listening. People don't listen. And part of that is because of all of our technology, texting and all these things, we're losing our communication skills. But people, when you are talking, the biggest communication problem that we're having is that we do not listen to understand, we listen to reply. I'm going to say that again. We do not listen to understand, we listen to reply. So we're thinking of our answer before they're even done saying the question. So a lot of times there can be a big miscommunication there. So let's talk about complete communication. Complete communication is when we have clarity, focus, and listening all going on at the same time. And that can be hard. Clarity, focus, and listening all at the same time. And there are a few other pieces. I put consideration in there. I put some other things into having complete communication. But the first three are clarity, focus, and listening. And the bullet points that I have for this, you'll see that they're so much different than the confusing communication. So the first one's high levels of integrity. Courageous confidence. So having confidence is actually helps you in your communication. If you think about it, somebody who's shy or withdrawn, their communication is really poor. Like, they don't talk. They sit back, they barricade themselves away, and so there's not communication. Accountability. So if we are accountable and we're following through and we know that we have to own the communication that we're doing, and we have to own how we're doing it. And when we can be accountable and be like, I totally messed it up. So I'll share my story and you'll love how I messed up. Being your word and keeping your word. When you say you'll do something, do it. That's part of communication. Holding yourself and others to a higher standard. Being open and willing to listen. Even though we say we need to work on our listening skills, we also have to want to listen. There has to be that want there to really feel like there's a need and that we're interested, right? Nurturing and effective in your skill. So there's a lot of skill in watching body language, watching tone and inflection, looking someone in the eyes, having that conversation and being good at it. So it takes a lot. So we need to be able to practice that skill. Being accepting and non-judgmental, being observant and aware of body language, being aware of what is going on, finding clarity and confirming what you heard, and being filled with lasting love. So I use lasting love instead of unconditional love. They're both the same, except that when I teach lasting love, it's limited love versus lasting love. Anything that has a time limit, or I loved you until this point, or I don't like how you acted, so now I don't love you. So lasting love in communication is having non-judgment, being unconditional at how you're talking to someone, and not letting judgment come into play before that conversation's over. Does that make sense?
Oh, yes.
So tons and tons of information. Now let me tell you my story. So a few years ago, my husband and I were at a couples retreat. Now, if you have a great marriage, that's awesome. We have a fantastic marriage. We've been married about 30 years at this point. And because we were willing to go to stuff like this together and to always work on having that great relationship, that made it for us to have a great marriage. So we're at this retreat because we love to be together, and it's, in a nice hotel, and we're going to go have some fun. And as we're there, the facilitator says we're going to do this communication exercise. And he, sets the whole mood. So we're sitting on a pillow facing each other, and he turns the lights down low and sets the whole mood and the tone for this conversation that we're supposed to be having. And he said, okay, so for this communication, and there was married couples, there were some couples in a serious relationship, and we even had a gay couple there. So in this particular thing, my husband was told that he was supposed to be giving me a hand massage, and I was supposed to communicate how I wanted that done. Well, we were one of the ones that had been married the longest. So 30 years, we had the people teaching this conference, we had them by, 15 years, maybe 18 years of marriage. So I'm like, whatever, we still got this. He knows how I like a massage. I wasn't worried at all. So the facilitator says, start. And my husband loves to be a jokester, and he just lathers up my hand and starts rubbing super hard. And I, on the other hand, have neuropathy. So I have pins and needles in my hands almost all the time. So what he's doing is hurting me. And I immediately went into, like, why are you doing this? Playing the blame game. You're hurting me. I didn't speak a word. So my only instructions are to tell him how I wanted it done. And he's just going crazy, just rubbing my hands and rubbing so hard and thinking he's being all funny. And I'm getting madder and madder and not saying a word. So I jumped to conclusions. I had all these expectations. I'm playing the blame game and not saying a word. Everyone else is having this fabulous time. They're all just like, oh, this is so awesome. And here's my husband, trying out for the deep tissue Olympics or something, rubbing on my hand. And I'm like, you're hurting me, knock it off. But not a word came out of my mouth. So this is what happens. We jump to conclusions, and we totally have lack of communication, and we we think that they know what we want without speaking the words. And yet, even though so much of our body language, so much of our attitude, our inflection can all mean parts too, if we do not speak up and actually say the words, they have no idea. They're in their assumption and their lack of communication because they don't know what we want. So as I took it as this whole big failure, and my husband's like, okay, so it's only a failure if you say you didn't learn anything. And it was so true because we'd been married for so long, I had all these expectations of like, oh, he knows what I want. I've been married for 30 years. Like, he won't hurt me. And instead of saying you're hurting me, I totally went to, how dare you? Like, why are you doing that? You know better. And he's not even thinking about my neuropathy because he had no clue that was a problem right then. So I share this example because it was a total fail, like total fail on our part. And it just shocked us both because we've always had good communication, we thought. And that's one of the things that we really had to look deep inside and go, okay, so where did we fail? Where did we jump to conclusions? Where did we have expectations? And so much of our world, we have expectations. We jump to conclusions, and we are already on edge of like, oh, I don't know. And that makes our communication difficult. So that would be my first thing about confusing and complete communication, and making sure that you are very clear and that you are constantly trying to stay in the complete communication in those bullet points of where you're in integrity and you're speaking your truth and you're considering other people and where they're coming from, and try to stay in that lasting love, that unconditional love space for that conversation.
I love that. So you did learn some good things, right? So it was not a total fail, right?
We learned a ton because at that point I was like, how many times am I doing that in my other conversation? How many times is that showing up in not only with my husband, but in just with clients and with everyone else? So it was a good learning situation for us.
I love that. And so, yeah, I think sometimes the confusion is like you did when we're silent and we're willing to speak up. And that's not really being in integrity when we hold things inside. And then other times it's confusing, I think, because we don't communicate the full exposure of what's going on in our minds, right? And so it's like, read my mind, honey. Didn't you know what I meant?
Exactly. And we jump to conclusions where we think it was meant a certain way and it wasn't. They didn't even say it that way. And we heard what we wanted to hear, not what they actually said.
Exactly.
Because we were already getting ready for our answer. Just like when I said that we don't listen to hear, we listen to respond.
Right. That is a really important listening skill that I myself am working on. I think I do it better. So, Chris, I really loved in some of your information, another fundamental that you teach about communication is the idea of consistent consideration. So how can this show up in communication, and why is that really important in our relationships with others?
Okay, so to really draw into consistent consideration, I have to tell my story. So it's a Saturday, it's noon, and this is the first Saturday I had been home, and this was, almost a year ago. Well, it was a year ago actually now, but it's a Saturday and it's noon. I'm home all alone, and it's the first Saturday since the new year. So I'm well into February by now, and I had the next 5 or 6 Saturdays after that I was going to be either out of town speaking or to conferences and stuff. So this was the only Saturday. So I'm totally in my pajamas, total bedhead going on, yesterday's makeup, and I'm all alone at my house. And I am in my office. I'm writing my book, which I just came out with my book, but I was at that point writing my book. And so I'm just, typing in the office and doing my thing. And all of a sudden, the back doorbell rings. Now, this is not the front door. This is the back door. So it's one room away from my office. It's glass doors, glass French doors that you can see clear into my kitchen. And I have no idea who's there. So I do what anybody else would do, right? I stand up, peek out the window to see who's in the driveway, see the vehicle, see if I really want to get caught, right? And I have no idea whose truck this is. So I have no idea who's here. I'm not dressed. Well, I'm in pajamas, but it was just like, do I really want to do this? And I finally just thought, okay, whatever. Fluff the bed head, wipe under my eyes with that mascara going on, and walk to the door. And I get to the door, and there is a youth that I don't know her, and she's standing there with a plate of cookies. So here she is holding these cookies, and I opened the door, and she said, hey, the youth in our area are spreading the love, and we thought of you. And I immediately went, oh, like I was considered, right? And there was so much consideration in how I felt about like, oh, somebody remembered me. Somebody thought of me. They're doing this great thing. Well, in communication, we have to have consideration in there. We have to add those thank yous, those thank you cards. Written communication is still communication. And we need those little notes. We need that boost of encouragement, those words of encouragement, which are consideration. Whether that's an employee, whether that's a spouse, whether that's a child, we need to build on letting them know how much they are considered and that they belong. Belonging is a major piece that we need. In Maslow's hierarchy of needs, so his little triangle, the third one up is belong. We need to feel like we belong. And to feel like we belong, we have to feel like people are telling us that we're being considerate of us. And as we are considerate of others, it is reciprocated. So what you put out comes back multiplied. So when you're telling your kids, pick up your stuff, I'm so sick of messes. Okay, are they going to be really excited and feel considered? No, they're going to feel like, oh, whatever, mom's mad. Or, when dad comes home, is there a honey-do list or is there a consideration for him working for you? One of the things we still have right now is a mechanic company. So it's a mobile mechanic business, and we'd only do a few days a week with us now, but my husband, part of the time is out in the weather. So today was one of those days you're out in the snow, out in the cold, and the minute they come through the door, are they being considered? Does he feel considered? Or does he feel like, like, whatever, I just walked in, right? And so consideration is such a big, big piece. So much of the time, we hear so much negative and so much anger and upset in our world that we need a safe place where we feel considered. We feel like we belong and we want to be there. We want to be part of that. So when this youth brought cookies to me, it was such a big piece. I have always been one about doing service, always been one about doing good things. But when the unexpected shows up back to you, it is so, so cool. And it makes such a big impact. Enough that I have shared this story quite a bit because they just thought of us. And when someone else is thinking of you, it makes you feel really good. So when we can add consideration in our communication, we will have so much more success and so much more happiness. And we will work through a lot of the difficult communication when we have consideration. Because you're thinking of how they will be affected. You're thinking about how it will affect that child long term. You're thinking about how, that friend that you've had for a long time, why are you having a discussion that's not very fun? So when you put consideration in the package, it really improves your relationships and it does help your communication.
Yeah, I definitely think that's a big part of it. We're getting a little bit of feedback. So if you're on a phone, could you just mute your phone? That would be fantastic. Thank you so much. So yeah, I love this piece on the considerate communication. And I know we've already kind of touched on listening and how important that is, and how sometimes when people are talking or asking us a question, we're already thinking so much of what our answer is. And so, Chris, can you give us a tip that would improve our listening skills? Because that is so important.
Well, first off, you have to be in tune. That's one of those pieces. And I always tell people not to multitask. When you're having a conversation, you need to look people in the eye. You need to face them and have that communication. Now, when I'm in my office, my back is actually to my kitchen. So when people come to the door, they're talking to the back of me for the most part. So I have to totally turn around and, totally be disrupted from what I'm doing. But when I don't turn around and I tend to be distracted, it's not good communication. So looking people in the eye, having that they feel important enough that you have the time to spend with them, especially with children or a spouse or a significant other, because they already have to compete with so many things for your attention and for your communication back and forth, that when you will stop and take the time, number one, you'll have answers quicker because you're not multitasking and distracted. But for number two, they feel like they're important in your life too. So it adds both benefits. One of the things that I always recommend is the love languages. So Gary Chapman wrote the book, 5 Love Languages. And if you haven't heard it or read it or been involved with it, it's one of the best things you can do is to learn the love language of your spouse, your kids, so that when you're talking with them, you can actually communicate with their love language. It improves your communication a ton, because when you speak to them in their love language, they understand it. They feel more loved. When you speak it to them in your own love language, sometimes they're repulsed by it because it's not their love language. They don't get it. They think you're all about you. So I really recommend reading Gary Chapman's book, The Love Languages, so that you know how to have that communication with each other and you know where they're coming from. So is it words of affirmation? Is it service? So you can speak the language that really resonates for them.
I love that. Yeah, I think we can always find those different resources to expand our communication skills. One thing I always love is learning about personalities as well. Because when you
which is very, very good.
Personality, then it's like, oh, I should maybe treat this person this way. We're all so different, but those categories kind of help us give a guidepost, right? Of how
right. I was at a huge retreat. Well, I can't say huge. It was a very intimate, small group, but I was in Texas at a retreat this last weekend, and we went through personalities. One of the personalities, that the way she does it is shapes, and one of them is a square. Well, a square hates hugs, and he's in this retreat with mostly women, and they want 5 feet of space around him, and she is so good at these personalities, the way she's broken him down and stuff. But that is so true, because he didn't want hugs, he didn't want to be interrupted, he didn't want you in his space. So even sitting next to him at the desk, he was wanting us to move away. That was his communication, is kind of like, get away. We did communicate. Same thing. We had a really shy girl that was like, I don't know, I'm a speaker, but I have a hard time. And I'm like, and it's bugging you to sit by people this close. She's like, yeah, it is. So we communicate all the time. Even when we don't say a word, we are communicating.
Oh, for sure. So I want to go back to your story about the hand massage. And the idea that you didn't say anything, okay? And I think there was some emotions going on, but sometimes we're afraid to speak up. We're afraid to say what's truly on our mind. Maybe we're going to offend someone, or we're going to rock the boat a little bit. So what kind of suggestions do you have for us that we can still speak up and not be silent, but communicate in a healthy way?
Well, there's a few things that I've got that I would like to share. But the first thing is, you need to assess, are you not speaking up because you're not owning your power and you're not like having to step out of the box and say it? Are you shunning, and are you basically swallowing your words back down? So is that something that you, in your confidence and in your self-worth and in your value, you need to work on those areas? Or sometimes you might be saying something that's not very nice. It might be true, but it's not very nice, and it's going to make them feel bad. And those feelings. So you have to ask yourself the question, is what I'm going to say really going to help us?
Mhm.
Because so much of the time we say those things to be mean, to be like, to get even. Like, oh, well, you said I didn't clean the house very good. I'm going to tell you, you didn't earn enough money. And we put those jabs in there as a self-defense mechanism to, well, if I feel bad, I want you to feel bad. And that ruins communication. It totally puts a damper on all of it. So my first thing is to look at yourself and say, evaluate. Is this going to help the situation? If it is something that a teenager needs to hear, it might hurt their feelings, because you can't do a whole lot of anything with teenagers without hurting their feelings. But they're going to hurt yours too, right? If it's something that needs to be said and it's a line in the sand that needs to be drawn, and it's definitely a value situation, so beliefs and values, and it needs to be stated, then it needs to be stated. If it's something that could go by the wayside and that it's not really going to change anything, don't say it just to hurt someone.
Mhm.
You know, if it's just going to cause more conflict. Now, something that I learned, and I'll tell you exactly where I learned it from, was Kirk Duncan. Kirk has a lot of amazing stuff. But one of the things that we learned from him, I think he calls it anchors away, but it's finished conversations. And you actually can have the conversation without the person being present, but you get to finish your side of the conversation. So another story for you. A few years ago, we were at a family reunion. Me and my children were supposed to be in charge of the games. It's 104 degrees outside. We're in the backyard at my parents' house, and they really want this volleyball net set up. It just wasn't working out very well, but I couldn't get the net to stay up, and I had shoulder surgery. So I'm in a sling. I can't do it. And I'm putting some pressure on my one son to do this. And he was like, I don't want to. I want to go. I'm done. We're not even playing volleyball. What's the big deal? And I put enough pressure to where I just said, I want it done, and you're going to help me. Well, he got in his stuff, and his way to communicate was to walk away. So he went, got in his truck, started his truck, didn't say goodbye to anybody. And I was like, what are you doing? We never end like this. Like, what is your deal? And he didn't say anything. He was mad. He stayed in his truck, and his wife was even, they'd been newly married. She was in tears going, I don't know what that deal is. What's his problem? Like, you just wanted the volleyball net up. And so we were just having this communication piece. Well, he went home, and even my husband called him that night and said, you owe your mom an apology. That is no way to handle this. It wasn't her fault that she needed this up. Like, you totally handled this wrong. Not a phone call. Nothing happened. About 3 days later, Wednesday evening, I decided I'm going to take Kirk Duncan up on this anchors away thing, and I am going to have this finished conversation. So I just said, okay, called my son by name and said, you know, I want to speak to your spirit. I want to talk to you. And I just totally had this conversation, just said, you were totally out of line. It really upset me. I should be able to expect for you to help. It was not a big deal for you to set up this volleyball net or reinforce it. And I was totally, you know, just unhappy with how you handled this. And you end it with, I love you. Please forgive me. I forgive you. It's kind of the ho'oponopono thing is how I end it. I don't even think Kirk Duncan taught us that. But I do a lot of ho'oponopono on top of the finished conversations, which is another good communication piece because you don't have to even talk to the person. You can just have that happen. Anyway, the very next morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, I get this phone call. And it's my son, and he says, well, first, before anything else, I just want you to know that I was completely out of line the other day. I am so sorry. And went into this whole thing, saying almost the exact words I had said. So if there's something that you really need to voice and get it off your chest, have a finished conversation where you don't actually speak to the person. You can call for their spirit to be there. But I do this in my car all the time. You can see me driving around. I'll be telling people that are driving weird and like, hey, it's okay that you don't know how to drive. I'm all right with that. It's okay that you're in my way or going really slow or you almost caused an accident. I have finished conversations all the time. And it really helps because you don't hold it with you and you don't take it to the next conversation so that you can have open communication without having the problems. So that one I think is huge for someone who's worried about rocking the boat or, causing more problems. And And I feel like that if it is something that needs to be said, by all means, you need to say it. And I think we're going to share a couple of things before we're done today of different ways to have actually safe communication and to have it set up so that you have communication going on and it's safer so you can actually say something in that conversation. I do, in fact, I'll just go into it a little bit, but we do what we call pillow talk. And in pillow talk, we have pillow talk at night, and it is roughly 10 to 20 minutes, and it is a safe place. So it's a communication time with me and my husband where the lights are off. So we're not watching body language. We're not watching face expressions. And you're safe to say anything that's come up. You can say, I'm really upset about this, or I had a bad day and this happened, or this child's not doing this or that. And it's not a time for you to argue it out or hash it out. It's a time for you to just be heard and for you to communicate about what's going on, what's upsetting you, what's going on your schedule, reviewing your schedule with your spouse or with your significant other to where you're both on the same page. And when you do this, what happens is you go to bed at the same time, you connect by laying there together. We kind of like to do the cuddle thing, but this is not an intimate, let's touchy-feely while you're trying to talk. This is having communication and having a chance to open up and speak. So for women, they use about 12,000 words, not 12,000, maybe it's 12,000 a day. And men do about 5,000. So we have like 2.5 times the words to get out, right? So they come home and they're like, hey, I've already done my 5,000. I don't need to say anything else all day. And we're still left like, I wanted to talk. I wanted to, tell you about my day or, discuss it. And so this is a good time for you to have that open time. And there's several different things that happen. You go to bed at the same time, you're both there. It starts to bring on that emotion. And before we end, I'm going to share the fastest way to raise intimacy in your relationship along with good communication. But this is one of those pieces where you have the conversation, you feel heard, you feel like you've communicated, and you're on the same page. You can go over calendars for the next day, who's picking up the kids, who's doing what, remind each other of your schedules so that there's not all this unknown, and it actually creates really good communication. So it's a great way to have open communication. It's a great way to end your day, and it's fantastic to keep everything neutral ground. And it's even a safe place for you to say, it really upset me when you contradicted me in front of the kids, or when you didn't support me and back me up when I was, speaking in front of the whole room, whatever it is that you feel like you didn't have the support. So it's a good time to actually voice it. They don't get to argue. And if they say something about, hey, I'm just like so tired of you not having stuff done on time, or whatever it is that they say, just say, okay, that's okay. But it allows you both to have a safe place to share and an opportunity to get those things off your chest so they don't build, which helps your confidence to know that you can have communication and it's not going to be a disaster. What happens when we're worried about hurting somebody's feelings or we're worried about what they might think or how it might come out is that we've had bad communication and a bad experience. So now we are gun shy. We're like, oh no, well, if I say the wrong thing, they'll get upset. Or if we talk about money, it always ends bad. Or we start to already have that apprehension start before we've even had a conversation. I mean, I have known clients that before they even say what they're going to say, they're already getting all worked up. But it's because they're going to their past and what's happened in that communication. Even when it's a safe space with me, they're starting to get all nervous. And I'm like, it's okay. You can tell me whatever you need to say. And it's going to be fine. But we need to know that it's going to be okay. And to do that, we have to start putting some good skills in place, and some good planning helps that a ton. So pillow talk is by far one of the best things that you can add if you haven't got something like that.
I love that. And Chris, don't you think it's a little bit almost practicing? You talk about we're trying to create this safe space. We're trying to practice the idea of having neutral emotions and let our spouse just share whatever. And we've talked about judgment, saying, I'm not going to judge you. I just want you to be able to feel comfortable and open to share. And so, yeah, I think there's definitely some practice there and learning those important skills. So how can this lead to better intimacy? That's an important part for married couples.
Okay, so the number one thing, and I've done this with hundreds of clients, the number one thing to raise intimacy is to do what I call 10 touches. So it's proven that we need touch. And there's a study done, you can go look on the internet, they did it with babies. And they did babies that only got touched like up to three or four times a day. So only just absolutely necessary. Bottles were propped and they just, got picked up enough to change a diaper and stuff. They like barely survived. They were below weight. They were cognitively slow and had a rough go. Babies that were between 4 and 6 to 7 were about average. So cognitive development was average. Their skill level, they learned to crawl about average, a little slow, but about average. And size-wise, they grew about average. And they stayed about the 50th percentile as far as muscle mass and stuff like that. The babies that were actually touched 8 to 10 or more times, held and cuddled and played with, were above average cognitively. They learned to crawl quicker. They learned to walk quicker. They talked full sentences quicker. And they grew and were on the upper 75 percentile of the scale. So size-wise, muscle mass, development, hand-eye coordination, all of it was improved. So when you do that as an adult, what happens is you start to feel drawn to each other. So you start this touch, which does an energy exchange, and it creates that bond. So I want you to think about teenagers. Some of you are probably closer to that age than I am. I'm an empty nester. So we're all about the 10 touches a day now. But as a teenager or a young adult and you're dating, they have to hold hands. You sit by each other. You're touching the whole side of your body. Your legs are crossed over each other. You're driving in the car and you've got like your hands on each other and touch each other's legs and like leaning over to touch shoulders, right? So you're drawn to each other and you have this energy exchange where you want to be together. You want to take it to the next level. You can call it chemistry. You can call it anything you want, but we're drawn to each other and drawn to each other romantically and want to be with each other. And that's all you can think about. That's all you want to do is just like, oh, I'm thinking about this guy or this girl. So if you fast forward that to where you are now, whether that's with children or you both have jobs, whatever that is, if you can do 10 touches or more a day, you will automatically be drawn to intimacy. Automatically. And if you add pillow talk at the same time, I'll tell you, pillow talk ends really, really well when you're done having your little chat. If you're having 10 touches, if you are being open and loving and having that sense to be together. So if that's a hug and a kiss goodbye in the morning, if that's when they come home and you give them a shoulder rub, or if that's standing next to each other and putting your shoulders together, enough to have that exchange of energy, pretty soon you're drawn to each other like a couple of teenagers. And it's really fun. But it has been remarkable to watch my clients be like, oh my gosh, you would not believe how much intimacy we are having, because it just sparks that, ignites that fire within, and you yearn for each other and you want them. Now, the other thing that happens is when you up the intimacy, your communication all of a sudden gets better. And because you're not doing the silent treatment, you're not being mad at each other. You're not putting up that wall and that barrier, that energy barrier of I'm mad, you ticked me off. I don't want anything to do with you right now. And so by having those barriers down, it opens up this whole new world of like, oh, this is like when we were first married. You know, they say the honeymoon's over. Well, not if you have 10 touches. It becomes fun. In fact, when you do it, you go, okay, so if you touch me, it doesn't count for you to touch. They have to touch back. I mean, then you're like, you're holding hands and you're, you know, skipping through the kitchen or something. But what happens is you're not only doing that with your spouse, but you also have 10 touches with children. So instead of having this drawn intimacy with that child, what happens is they feel loved. They feel loved unconditionally. They feel like it's okay to mess up and you can still go on, and they could tell you anything. One of the things we did with our kids is we said, if you ever have something that you need to talk about, just say, can we talk? And that meant we go off to mom and dad's master bedroom, the doors are closed, and mom and dad can't freak out. No matter what you say, you are not in trouble. We are talking this out. And it didn't matter what you had to talk about. So creating that safe place. So that's pillow talk and adult talk versus can we talk with the kids? When you create a space to have good communication, then all the communication levels are raised. When you raise those communication levels, there's only up to go, right? If we, you know, we can go down if we really want to, if we really want to fail, but all of a sudden we're not yelling anymore. We're not having cross words. We're not swearing at each other. We're not doing those things that could be happening, and we're not being as critical. We're not being as negative because we're having all the other needs fulfilled. So when we're having 10 touches, we're feeling worthy. We're feeling loved. We're feeling accepted, wanted, needed, like we belong. So all of those natural instincts are coming, and along with all of that, then we have sexual desires, and we're drawn to each other, and we have all of that connected the way it's supposed to be, instead of creating all these walls and these barriers and for protection, when really it's not protecting us. It's creating us to be alone and lonely and depressed and frustrated and angry and feel unworthy and feel like we're not enough. So when we can really put the barriers down and try for good communication, and yeah, it takes practice. Just the other day, and I was asking Bill the story because I'm like, that's a really good one for the webinar, and I can't remember what it was. But he thought he heard one thing. I said something, and I was in the other room saying it to him, and we were on complete opposite ends. And I'm like, that's a great example. And it was something to do with, he thought we were already done, and we still had something to do, and it was doing our video or something. Anyway, it was the perfect time of, because of lack of communication, we both thought our own thing. We both thought we expected it to be different. There was this total like, what in the heck happened, right? And those are going to happen. We're going to think we said it, or we're going to say, no, I said it this way or that way. But when we have the open communication, we can be like, this was really frustrating, and I really don't want it to be like that. It's an open opportunity to say, hey, can we have a do-over? Let's do better. Let's both strive to do better and have better communication.
Oh,
so add 10 touches if you want intimacy to raise.
And I can see that whether you've got young kids at home because they take a lot of your time and focus, or like Chris and me and my husband, we're near empty nesters. We have a 16-year-old at home. But I can see the importance no matter what stage of life with our relationships with the 10 touches. So I love that. Well, I wanted to share real briefly this idea about the miscommunication. My husband and I had the perfect example the other day. He was in the bedroom resting on the bed, and dinner was almost ready. So I went in, I said, hey, dinner's ready. I'm just going to need to figure out a vegetable. So in my mind, I'm saying, dinner's ready. Come in the kitchen. Let's eat, right? And in his mind, he's thinking, oh, she's still got to figure out the vegetable. And for me, it was grab a can of green beans. It takes a few minutes and it's ready to go. He's thinking, I'm going to go be digging out some vegetables and preparing them. So I go in, get dinner finished, and then I go back to the bedroom, and he's taking a nap. We're like, okay. So it's just that thing. What is going on in your minds if we don't have that complete communication we do not understand? what's going on in each other's minds. So I just thought that was a funny example.
Well, it's okay to say, hey, I messed up.
Yeah.
You totally did it wrong, totally messed up. Have a hug and a kiss and go, that was two.
There we go. Get those
I have another ones today. I'm almost done. Don't tick me off. I still have to touch you one more time, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And just have fun with it. When you can have fun and you're enjoying the moment, it will be more authentic and more real, and you'll feel the desire and the passion. And it really does help on all different levels.
Oh.
But be willing to say, hey, I made a mistake.
Yes.
And be willing to apologize. That in communication is huge. Be willing to say, I'm wrong. I totally messed this up, or I took this wrong. Yeah. But take accountability and stand your ground. Even if you did take it wrong and you were completely out of line, if you say, I took it wrong and this is how it meant it was for me and I overreacted, by owning that, you have just taken your power back. And, the next time you're going to be a little bit more careful at how you jump to conclusions. And you're going to learn to move past and do better at communicating.
I love that. So own your mistakes and let go of perfectionism. We'll have to do a webinar on that sometime.
Yeah, totally let go of that one. I have a lot on that one.
And yeah, so lots of fun stuff we could talk about. I just loved the tips that Chris has shared with us today and her wonderful, hilarious stories. I hope all of you have had an opportunity to take good notes. If not, no worries. She's going to be sending you out some lists in our email. We're going to make sure and get this in a recording for you. So listen to it again. There is so many gold nuggets in here that are very valuable and I know can make a huge difference in your relationships, really deepen that connection with those people that you care most about in your life. So Chris, do you have any closing tips for us? And also please share, how can they find out about your book and what other wonderful offer do you have for them tonight?
Well, the first thing I want to do is a lot of the information that I shared tonight are in 2 different blogs that I have and 2 different videos. So if you just go to YouTube and put Chris Barney in there, so Chris with a K, Chris Barney, and then if you will put ATP for All Things Possible, so ATP, and the one is number, I wrote them on here somewhere. Okay, so Connect in Complete Communication is number 116. So if you just put Chris Barney, ATP 116, it will take you right to the video that I do on Complete Connection. And if you go to my website, allthingspossible.biz, so that's B-I-Z, in January of 2017, I do the Connect in Complete Communication, which is also what you were talking about in the email. They can get that from the blog. And the blog has the bullet points. Now, I will be sending out to those who are on right now, I will be sending out an email, but you were going to put this up on YouTube. So anybody else that's just watching this, they can go to that. Another one that I do, you'll hear my cookies story about the girl that brings cookies to my house, but that one is, again, ATP 96. So it's episode 96, All Things Possible. So it's ATP, just put Chris Barney, ATP 96, and it'll pop right up in YouTube. And that will give you the consideration, the complete connection, and it will talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and stuff like that as well. And that one, if you want the blog to that, that's going to be February of 2016. So on my website, you can get those and you can get all that information. But if you would like the 7 traits, Connect in Complete Communication is only one of the 7 traits that I teach all the time. So my book just came out. You can get it for $9.95. That's a discounted rate for right now. And just go to my website, allthingspossible.biz. And you can, right now it's still on the home page. That's going to change in a few days. But if not, it's on the products. I also have my CDs that are there that you can get. Instead of being $96, you can get my CDs for $19.95. So that's a great deal. The other thing when I send the email out is I'm going to offer anybody that's on the webinar a free 30-minute strategy session. So we'll do that over the phone. And there will be a link in the email that you can just click and it will get your information in so that we can schedule that. And I am giving that offer for anybody that's on this with us.
Wow, that's such a great offer. I hope you guys will take advantage of that. And yeah, like we said at the first, Chris has like over 150 videos up, so there's a ton of things that you can learn from her, and it's such a privilege to have her here. I also wanted to offer something for those of you listening to the call. My husband and I, we really support marriages, and we just redid our website, really beautiful. And I have this meditation called the True You Ultimate Meditation. And so first of all, if you want to reduce some stress, it's 13 minutes of fantastic stress reduction. And it's a popular meditation that I have that people have requested it. And I also do energy healing work. And I know that Chris's husband, Bill, is an energy healer as well. And so we have something in common there. And I had a potential client one time who was going to set up an appointment with me, and I sent her the meditation to kind of help her prepare for it. And then she sends me an email back. She says, "That was so fantastic. I don't think I need to set up an energy healing session with you." So if that tells you how good it is, she loved it. And it really helps you connect with that true essence in your core of who you really are, and connect with your purpose in life. And it's super fantastic. So if you go to my site, it's Be the True You, and that's the letter U, not the word you, BeTheTrueYou.com. We also have just fantastic things to support marriage and family relationships. Things like this webinar with Chris Barney. I know you guys have loved this. She just shared from the heart some really great tools and things to help you in your relationships. We also have a retreat coming up in June. Just all sorts of really great things to support your relationships there. So Chris, do you have anything in closing that you would like to share before we sign off for the night?
Thanks for having me. Thanks for letting me be a part of this. I love to be able to share and to just encourage everybody to have good communication. That is so important. So if you have any questions or you want to reach out to me, that's great. But my biggest thing is thank you for having me on here and letting me be in your world, because I love being a part of it. I love saving marriages. I love having that family unit be the key piece for everything. And so I really value this. So thank you.
And thank you again. You're all in good hands with anything that Chris has to share. So we will let you guys go, and everybody have a great night. Watch your email for all the great things we have coming after the webinar for you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.